So when you think copyright, that is like a creation. So, that's like a picture, a blog post, like the course content. But the trademark is really the branding aspect of it. So it's the name of something that you're protecting.
Welcome back to the Successful Stylist Academy podcast, everyone. I am your host, Ambrosia Carey, and we get a part 2 with Kelli Jones, who is a trademark lawyer, and we talked about contracts in the last episode. So if you missed that, I will link that in the show notes. So you can tap on that and listen away to your heart's desire, all about the fun parts of contracts. But today we're actually going to be talking about trademarks, which is something that I feel like an infant in. I don't know anything about trademarks. So Kelli, thank you so much for hanging out with us again and sharing all of your information with us today.
Thanks so much for having me again.
Yes, of course. So if you can give us the nuts and bolts, like what specifically does a trademark entail and what does it cover? Literally, I don't know anything about trademarks.
Yeah. So basically a trademark is something that is part of your brand and it's identifying your goods and services. So it can be basically it's a word or a phrase mostly. So it could be your business name. It could be a podcast name. It could be a course name, a product line name, basically anything that you use as part of your brand and that you use in connection with your goods or services. So it's not, just like a fun saying you have, but it's something that you actually use to people identify it with you, with the goods and services that you have.
Okay. So if you were to give an example, let's say on my website, I have ambrosiacarey.com and everything in that website was something that I created myself. Is that an example of something that I would want to trademark? So somebody wasn't going to use that as under their own identity? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So basically, here's the difference between trademark and copyright. So when you think copyright, that is like a creation. So, that's like a picture, a blog post, like the course content. But the trademark is really the branding aspect of it. So it's the name of something that you're protecting. So, it's like it could be the name of a framework that you have or the name of like, a product, like Hot Tools or any of the like hair tools name, hair product name, like those would all be something that you'd trademark. And really the whole point of a trademark is to prevent consumer confusion. So you don't want people popping up with like the same or a similar brand name selling the same or similar things because people would be confused. They'd go to Google, like if someone had Hot Tool and someone had Hot Tools, like you go to Google, you don't know which one's which, you wouldn't know which one to purchase, which one did your friend tell you that they got. So that's really the whole point. So if someone has something that is so unrelated, let's say someone forms Hot Tools, but it's for like, not that they would, but like a financial consulting firm, like that's fine. Two things that are so unrelated can exist because someone's not going to accidentally like purchase from a financial consulting firm when they meant to like buy a hair tool online or something, and like vice versa. But something that is more close, like let's say it's, hair accessories or a beauty product, like, skincare or something, that is much closer. They're sold in the same stores. A lot of brands sell both of those types of things. So that's much more similar. So that's really what the trademark protects from other people popping up with a similar brand that people could get confused from.
Okay, that part makes sense. So if I were to use, let's say Successful Stylist Academy as one of those concepts. So we have a website. We have services that we provide to hairstylists and salon owners. We have a consultant. I'm the consultant. We have a consultant. I'm the only consultant, but then we do have other coaches that fit under that umbrella who are independent. And, we bring them in basically and kind of vet them out to the appropriate stylist who may need them. So if there's like a solo stylist that needs to work with a solo stylist who has had a successful business, they would work with that coach that specifically works with solo stylists. So there's an example. Now, I did see, I don't know, maybe I'm going to go ahead and guess anywhere between 4 and 6 months ago that there is a website that is called Successful Hairstylist, which is kind of the same concept. I'm not sure who the person is or any of that stuff, but it could be confused with Successful Stylist Academy and Successful Hairstylist. And we even have a course called Successful Hairstylist. So what advice would you give on to mitigate the confusion there?
Yeah, so that's really what the trademark is intended to prevent. So the US, the law really is whoever like uses it first has the most rights to it. But when it comes down to it, even if you were using it first, if someone else gets the trademark first, it's really hard to overcome it unless you have a lot of money to do that. So even though the law is who's using it first, the best like practice is really to be the first to file the trademark, because when someone files the trademark and gets it registered, which the whole process takes a little over a year, but once they have a registered trademark, then they can go out and be, sending cease and desist letters or lawsuits, if it escalates to that, to any other, brand that is the same or similar, basically anything that could potentially be causing confusion. So that's really the issue, is that you never want to be the one that's not the first to file, because you don't want to be the one hit with the cease and desist letter and forced to like rebrand because someone else got there first. And then, rebranding is never fun.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my gosh, you made me think of something. I have a friend in the industry that teaches all about Instagram tips, and it had the word gram in the word, and she did get a cease and desist from Instagram, and she had to change everything after years of building that business. Unfortunately, I feel like she did a pretty good job of kind of transitioning everyone and letting them know and giving them plenty of heads up. But
Mhm.
I remember just the sheer panic that she had over that happening. So, what a fascinating thing. Okay, so on the flip side, what advice would you have for people before they go through the trouble of branding, creating a website, creating the name, getting the LLC, all that stuff?
Mhm.
What would be your advice to do that vetting process before, or I don't even know if I'm saying the right word, but what would be your advice for someone who is doing their homework before they actually decide on a real name and build a business out of it?
So there's a couple of steps. So the first thing is a free basic search on the USPTO website. That is a great starting point, because it can basically, you go on their site, you can put, whatever you're thinking about, whatever ideas you have in, and it'll show you a list of results. It'll show you if the trademark is active versus if it's like abandoned, maybe they've gone out of business like 20 years ago, something like that. It'll also show you what they are either registered in or pending for. And that can help because, like I said, if it's something similar, but it's some totally unrelated industry, fine. It's not a red flag. If it's somewhere closer to what you're doing, then that's could be a red flag. That's only a basic search. It can only tell you usually like exact, like identical matches. It really can't help with things that like might be spelt a different way or have additional words. That could also be an issue. So that's a great starting place. Also, Google search is good to see what else is out there. Because, even if the trademark is available, but like people have the website and like there's tons of listings on Google, then, maybe that's not the way you want to go anyway. So those two things are like absolute musts. And then the next best thing to do is really like, basically, when you go to a lawyer, the first thing that we do before we actually file a trademark application is we do a full search to assess the risk level of it. And that's much more in depth than the free basic one that you can do on the USPTO site. And this is really the best place to like, we call it like, okay, we're going to clear your name for use essentially, because that's where we really see like, oh, okay, are there potential issues? Are you going to have to rebrand? Is there like infringement issues that, you're going to start and then you're going to get hit with a cease and desist from this business? So that's like the next best thing if you are able to do that, because that's really what's going to give you that peace of mind to continue building the business, knowing that you'll be able to hopefully stick with that name as opposed to having to rebrand at some point in the future. So those are really the best ways. And I usually tell people like the more that it would cost you to rebrand, the more important it is to have that search done before you start putting money into your brand. Because, if let's say you're like a social media coach online, of course, rebranding is going to be annoying and costly, especially the further along you are. But it's not the same level of money if you have products that you're going to have to now scrap and like replace, do all that like branding for the products. Again, the whole inventory, you lose all your inventory. Or if you have a brick and mortar, let's say you paid for a huge sign and now you have to like change that, like, so there's kind of a spectrum of like, okay, I'm putting so much money into building this business. The more money you're putting in, the more likely you want that trademark to be one of your first priorities. Just so you don't have to, any money that you put in wasn't for nothing and you're going to have to, redo it later on.
That's actually a good point because I didn't think about this. So if somebody were to have a logo made and all their branding was done, and let's say 5, 6, 7 years go by and they decide to rebrand everything, like everything looks different. The logos change, even colors, the fonts, everything. If that person were to go through that process, does the trademark still hold that? Or do you have to get a new trademark on the rebranding?
So it really depends on what you filed for. So usually I'd say the top priority of what we file for are the words themselves, not the logo. You can file for a logo as well, but usually that is either we're filing both together because you're financially able to file both, or we just do the words, because when you trademark just the words, so like just the name of your salon or something, that you're getting protection over the words themselves. So then you can use them in any font, any color, any design, whatever you want, because you're getting ownership essentially over the words themselves. If you file for the logo, you're only getting protection of that exact logo. You can apply in black and white. That way, if you change the colors, like that's fine. Like, you change from blue to green or something, like it's still protected. But if you change the design or something, then yes, you'd need a whole new trademark for the new logo. So that's where, like, if the rebrand is just the logo, if you have the word mark trademark, then, you're fine as long as you're not changing the actual name of it itself.
Okay, so I have a question specific to you and just the types of clients you deal with, because it sounds to me like you have all kinds of clients. Do you have, like, if you could think of all the clients you've worked with, do you have like a great success story to share? And then on the flip side, do you have any, I don't know, like horror stories, or maybe just something that it was a huge learning lesson for that person? Or, I think just the repercussions of not doing those steps that are so important to protect your business.
Yeah. So I worked with people in so many industries, like, I don't know, probably more than 30 different industries, but I do somehow, like, it just kind of happened this way that I do have a large percentage of clients in the beauty industry. Just because like I started with a few and then they referred me to a lot of people. So it just kind of spread that I have like a lot of beauty industry clients. And it's actually, I always say, like, I try to make content sometimes specifically about this because the beauty industry is one of the harder industries to get a trademark in. So I always say, like, if you're in the beauty industry, you have to prioritize a trademark before a lot of other industries that I've seen because of how hard it is, just because a lot of the wording is kind of similar that people are using, like aesthetics, skin, beauty, like a lot of people use the same type of even descriptors like glow, glowing, glowy, like, there's a lot of overlap. So, one client I had, so she ended up filing a trademark 6 days after someone else, because when you're filing, even if you do that search, it only shows as the day you actually do the search. And it doesn't always go even, so then you do the search and then we try to file as quick as you can after that. But anytime in between that period, you don't know who's filing. And even when you do file, it usually takes 1 to 2 weeks to show up live in the system, the public view. So you can't see, there's like a, 1 to 2 week block basically. And someone ended up filing within that time. So at the time she ended up she had also, right before that, she had actually rebranded because of someone else. She was actually like, I think she got a letter from someone else. So then she had been a couple years in business. She had built up to being like the first spot on like Google search, like, all this stuff, building up her business. Then that happened. The other person got the trademark, so then she had to rebrand. And then when she's rebranding, that's when we find out someone else filed for something similar 6 days before her with her new brand. So we got a refusal like 10 months later when the trademark office finally started to review her application, because that's how long it takes them, because they're federal government, very slow. And then we ended up, I think her application ended up getting suspended for a while, because that application that was 6 days before her, it was refused because of it, but their application hadn't been registered yet. So hers was just kind of, my client's was just like in limbo until that one fully registered. So it was just hanging out. And then it ended up where like that one ended up getting a refusal because of someone else that my client didn't get. So then it just ended up with like, I think it was like 2.5 years after we applied, that other one ended up abandoning. So my client ended up being able to get her trademark. But it was just like a really long journey into the whole process. Just because of how long it takes, and also just how competitive the wording is in the beauty industry. But that was a good one. Another client also took a couple of years, where we had a similar one in another state, and ultimately they were able to, she got a refusal because of the other brand, but they were able to negotiate terms together to basically coexist, agree not to, my client agreed not to like open up a brick and mortar in their state and vice versa. And they were able to negotiate terms. That way my client could get her trademark. So that was a good story.
Wow. So is trademark state to state?
No, so it's federal.
Okay.
You can get a state trademark, but it's just it's not always like a federal one trumps it. So if someone has the federal and you only have a state one, you might not have that much anyway. So most people just go for the federal, because you might not be that protected in a state trademark.
Wow, that is crazy. And that's so good to know. I think for everyone that's listening, if you're a salon owner, this is something definitely worth looking into. Or if you're thinking about opening up a salon, these are all the things that you should be doing your homework on ahead of time. That's a huge thing, to put so much time, money, effort into building a business only for it to be too close to someone else's. And then you get a cease and desist. How upsetting would that be? Oh my gosh. I mean, that could really, really hurt somebody's business if they weren't clever enough and how they could pivot into a way to preserve their own business that they've built. So wow, that's really good. I just learned a lot right there. Just even in this little bit that you've shared with us. And I'm sure there are so many more complexities to it. But it sounds like that's the whole point in having a trademark, is to not let things go off the rails and to keep things as simple and clean as possible. If I were to use an example, there is something in our industry that we've been hearing for so long, like literally, I feel like it's been like a decade, where the buzzword has been six-figure stylist. I even had a class, Kelli, that I did on the road before the pandemic, it was called six-figure stylist. Like I literally had like a pamphlet and handouts and the whole thing. Six-figure stylist was just so easy for people to understand like really what it is. But since then, there have been many different businesses that have opened up, and even schools that are called six-figure stylist, or they have a class called six-figure stylist. And so I guess if somebody were to file that trademark, which I don't know if that's already been done or not, would that be the same process? If they file the trademark, they could actually tell everyone that has anything related to six-figure stylist that they have to change the name of it?
They could. So that's where it kind of gets tough too, and who was actually using it first, because someone could get a trademark for something because they filed first, but then someone else could come along potentially and say like, no, I was actually using it first. But the problem there is, if you're going to say I was using it first to someone with a registered trademark, you'd essentially have to petition to cancel their trademark, which typically, like average cost is about like 100,000 to do that. So like, what small business owner has that lying around? And like, I know I don't. So it's
Definitely
a
not
lot,
me.
like it's a huge process. So that's why I always say like, it's best to be the first to file, because like, if someone has the trademark, then they can, kind of like take over, and send cease and desist and stuff, shut down these other people. Because if you have the trademark also, like, sometimes it's not even just a cease and desist, but like if you have it and someone else pops up with a similar handle on Instagram, you just send it to Instagram, your trademark, and you can get the other account taken down sometimes. So that's where it's like tough if you don't have the trademark, that like even if you maybe have rights to it, it often comes down to like if you don't have the trademark, then you're gonna have to have a lot of money to like fight it, which sucks, but it's unfortunate reality.
Okay, I have one last question about this. If you're talking about a technique that somebody is like, I invented that technique, I have ownership over that, because people, that's how people, especially artists in my industry, when we come up with something that's really clever, we take a lot of pride in it and we want to
Mhm.
share it, but at the same time, we still want credit for it. So I guess what's the proper way that you should do something versus the way that you legally should do something, I guess is my question.
Yeah, so I think it really depends on what it is too. Because certain things, are going to be more generic, like no one can stop other people from using certain things, maybe like highlights, like toner, like things that are more generic, like they're the names of things. So you can't like, get ownership of certain things like that. Um, which I assume balayage is probably at this point like that because it's the name of something.
Yeah.
Um, although I just typed in balayage to see like on trademarks, and there are a bunch of that, like there's a bunch of brands that use it in with something else, like 3D balayage is a trademark for hair combs and hair coloring services. Um, Someone tried to apply for French balayage. There's Sunlight's balayage. So like there's a lot of things. So it really kind of depends too on, what, like, do they have a trademark for it? Do they, not even necessarily that they have to have it for you to be potentially infringing, if they're going to say like they're the inventor of it. Do they have like intellectual property rights to it? So it's kind of like a gray area sometimes because you don't necessarily always know, like certain things, I would say if it's created by someone else, there should always be kind of like a caution, like you should always kind of use a bit of caution with it because if you're putting on your brand like Air Touch or something and that was a trademark of someone else's, sometimes just giving credit alone isn't like that doesn't make it like, oh, you're not infringing on someone else's brand. The same, it goes back to same thing with like what you mentioned about the person who was using Graham in their course title. Like, I'm sure everyone knows that she was not trying to pretend like she was the owner of Instagram, but that didn't like the intent doesn't always matter. It's still potentially infringement because it's the other person's brand. So that's where like this could kind of be too, of like, it really depends. Like, if they're using it as a brand and then how are you using it? Are you mentioning it in like a paragraph as you're like explaining something on your website? That's different than if you're like calling something, air touch method or something, or like service, So kind of depends. It's a gray area.
Well, that's good to know. I feel like we all live in the gray a little bit. So sometimes it just helps knowing, I guess, what maybe our rights are versus, how far into the tunnel you actually want to go with that. I guess, for instance, if somebody were to come up with a very brand new technique and they were to say, like, I invented this tool, but there's no trademark on the tool yet, would that person want to go through the process of making sure they secure that trademark before they actually share it on the internet or whatever with people?
Yeah. So I mean, best case scenario is that yes, you file for the trademark before you publicly announce something. Overall, applications in general, it's about 50-50 of people that file before announcing versus people that file, after they're already selling. Um, so yeah, best case is that you can do that search, you can file the application before you ever even publicly announce it, because that's, the most proactive way. Of course, that doesn't always, align, especially because, there's financial consideration piece to it. So, maybe not, but as soon as, as close to launch as possible, if it can't be before launch, then is always the best case, because unfortunately, sometimes people just apply for something without realizing that you've already applied, or they know nothing about you. Although, and then also the other side are sometimes people do apply maliciously. I've seen people, like, someone announced something on TikTok and someone else went and filed the application for it and then basically said, well, I'll give it to you for $17,000. So, it's just tough. Like, if you're announcing something and haven't filed the trademark, it's just a little riskier.
Well, this is all useful information, and I really appreciate you breaking down these different scenarios and kind of like, I guess, in a way, dumbing it down for us, because like I said, this is all stuff that's kind of new to our industry. And I feel like we're all figuring it out as we go, especially when it comes to social media and just kind of knowing how to protect ourselves as artists and still share, our work and want to get discovered. And at what point do we kind of start to cross that line a little bit? So I'm sure if people have individual questions, they can reach out to you. I will definitely put your information down in the show notes at Lawyer Kelli. And you guys, if you missed the last episode where we talked about contracts, go ahead and listen in on that too, because there was a lot of really helpful resources, I think, as far as what you should be doing and what you should be thinking about to protect your business and to protect how you want to enforce your cancellation policies. So thank you once again, Kelli, for hanging out with us. It was really fun to learn from you. And your breath of fresh air. Like, I feel it's, sometimes we get an idea in our mind of what a lawyer is like, or, I think we typecast a little bit. And I feel like you kind of strip all that away, where you're very approachable, you communicate very well. You're active on social media. I see your stuff coming up, and I feel like you break things down in a way that makes it really nice, bite-sized pieces to understand. So I want to thank you for doing that and for kind of pioneering that. Do you have any last words that you want to leave us with, as far as just the importance of contracts and trademarks for our beauty business?
Really just that, the more proactive you are, the better it usually will be for you long term. And also, usually the more money you'll save by being proactive too, versus having to like deal with annoying situations down the line. And listen, if something pops up and then we need to fix it, you weren't proactive, something happens, like, it's not the complete end of the world. We'll find a way to fix it, get around it, whatever has to be done. It's better to just, tackle it head on. And I promise to give you grace and not be one of those lawyers who like shame you about it. So yeah.
I already got that sense from you. Well, thank you, Kelli, for hanging out with us. Everyone, don't forget to dream big, set goals, and take some action on your business. And we are here for you each step of the way. We will see you next week. Take care.